Welcome to the Nation. On Bernama, I'm NADIAH Abdul. Today we're looking at Malaysia's real estate sector, a part of the economy that affects home buyers, investors and businesses alike. The first half of 2025 has seen resilience and shift in areas of industrial and hospitality. But what's actually driving these trends and what lies ahead? Joining us today is SUBRAMANIAM, Group Executive Chairman of Knight Frank, to share his insights. Thank you for joining today. Apa khabar?
All good, all good. Thank you, Nadia, and thank you, Bernama, for having me here today to highlight what's happening in the real estate market.
Wonderful. Let's go straight into it. Let's start with the big picture, right? When we're talking about Knight Frank's latest report, and this suggests that there's a steady growth across the different major real estate sectors in the first half of 2025. How would you summarize this overall health, the overall growth of what we're seeing in Malaysia's real estate market today?
Actually, what is really happening is the fact that our economy is healthy. That spurs the real estate market. As you know, our GDP is forecasted to be between 4.5 to 5%. Our inflation is at low, forecasted around 2 to 3% this year. Unemployment is also low, 3.1%. External trade is up. Private investment, both domestic and foreign, is up. So my one-word summary, if I want to say, is the economy is healthy, which is spurring the real estate market. A lot of foreign investment coming into our manufacturing side, and this is really what is driving the real estate sector. And of course, tourist arrivals are up, tourist expenditure is up. Certainly, all these things are acting together, melting together to form a strong, healthy, stable real estate market.
So the ecosystem looks quite good right now.
Yes.
I want to ask you about the question that almost everybody talks about. We're always talking about interest rates. We're always talking about inflation trends. Now, how is this shaping demand across the property market that we're seeing?
Actually, as you know, Bank Negara reduced interest rates from 3% to 2.75%. And that will really help. Of course, that was done to ease the pressure from the tariffs. At that time was uncertain. Now we are very sure the tariffs is 19%, and it's the same level playing field with most of the other Southeast Asian countries. So I do believe that sets the tone. Investors will be cautious because whatever it is, the tariffs are higher than what it used to be. But good for the government managed to finalize it to at least the same level as the other countries. So therefore, I believe all this come together, and certainly our real estate market a little bit cautious, but at least we got some certainty right now.
So despite the fact that Bank Negara rates have held steady, and we know that in recent quarters we're also seeing concerns about the cost of living, we're seeing pressures shaping demand and supply for both commercial and industrial, you believe that's still going to be okay? We look like we're on track.
We are on track. Whatever it is, we're on track. Cost of living is rising, that's true, but it's still manageable. As you know, our retail spending is expected to be about 3% for this year. Of course, the first quarter it was higher because we had a lot of festivity at 5%. So people are still spending, although more cautiously.
Right. Now let's talk about the industrial sector. We often talk about the industrial sector like this sort of rising star, right? We know that the industrial real estate has been a clear bright spot over the last few years, especially driven by the over 163.6 billion in data center investments. Now, what's fueling this wave, Sarki? I mean, what are we looking at? How sustainable is this growth?
Okay. When it comes to data center, why did it take off in Malaysia? We must first understand that. Because we have abundance of water and electricity. And at one stage, the Singapore government decided that there will be a freeze in data center development because they didn't have enough juice, power. And now, what we are seeing now is, because of this, there's been a tremendous interest coming into data center. And as you quoted just now, 163.6 million. But if 2024 itself was 47 billion compared to 2023, and and it increased in 2025 another 42.6 billion only in this first quarter. So as you can see, the demand is coming in. However, it is stabilizing. A lot of people are jumping into the bandwagon to build data centers to get this thing going. So it's kind of getting stable and people are getting cautious about it. Is it really growing as fast? Is the approved projects really going ahead?
Yeah.
Yes, it is, but we are now looking at ESG in data center. We are looking at about conserving water, limiting water usage data center. We're afraid that if it grows too much, and then there might be pressure on infrastructure. Electricity tariffs have gone up, and so government is driving the sustainability agenda when it comes to data centers. So I would say data centers is growing. A lot of demand is coming. We are yet to see the cautious implementation of these data centers. But what is important is timely support to make sure what has been approved is getting implemented.
So what does timely support look like to you then?
No, the way I look at it, the government is in the right direction. I mean, maintaining ESG issues when it comes to data center and making sure the infrastructure is provided, and TNB and SPAN is really making sure that there is no bottlenecks to hold back the development of these data centers. And it's healthy. It is healthy, yeah.
And I think if we're talking about specific states, we know that states like Johor and Penang and Sabah are definitely emerging, in terms of industrial competitiveness and growth engines. What are some of the key factors that you're seeing coming out of this region? Also tying into the fact that you did mention about ESG and how a lot of these states are not only just looking at building more infrastructures, but building more infrastructure sustainably. Thoughts?
Correct. That's the key, building it sustainably. Johor on itself is because of the JSSEZ, Special Economic Zone that has been signed recently in January with Singapore.
Yeah.
And that is basically because the relationship within the two nations is getting much more friendlier, much more trust is coming in, and therefore this has been signed. So that is driving it. But of course, the infrastructure like RTS, the rapid transport system, is being built. It's already 50% complete. So Johor is predominantly driven by these two main factors. Not only that, the Gemas Johor double track, electrified double track, which is really important to set the infrastructure for Johor. Johor had been in doldrums for a very long time. In fact, its market, real estate market, declined after too much of speculation. Yep. Now we see it coming back up again. A lot of interest in Johor, industrial interest and all that. It's spurring the entire growth of Johor.
What about maybe Penang and Sabah? I mean, definitely we see a lot of movement happening in Johor and Singapore because of the special economic zones. And of course, we're going to see a movement in talent base. We're going to see a movement in quite a lot of other things that are happening between Johor and Singapore, of course. But perhaps thoughts on maybe Penang and Sabah? Penang
is one of the major suppliers of semiconductors, E&E, and it constitutes about 5% of global demand for chips, semiconductor chips, and it is an established industrial area like Batu Kawan and Bayan Lepas and all that, and infrastructure is there. Government is building more like the what do you call the Silicon Island reclamation project. So Penang is in the right track, and all this, including of course the LRT that is being built, that's spurring the growth in Penang. The interest in semiconductor, E&E business manufacturing that's coming into Penang is what is really spurring the Penang economy and the ease of doing business.
Right.
At the end of the day, if foreigners want to invest in this country, is how ease of doing business is important. Sabah on its side is it received 10.9 billion worth of approved investment in first quarter of 2025. There's demand coming in because both the government and private sector seeing that Sabah is potentially a good hub to go manufacture, to do their manufacturing.
Yeah. And I do see that in the next few months there's going to be even more interest happening in Sabah, of course, coming with the state elections. But all that actually talks about how each of our different hubs, you mentioned hubs, and I think that's a very key word here. There are different centers of excellence across Malaysia that's going to be seen as a build-up, not only just because we're leading ASEAN, but this has been in the blueprint for many, many years before.
Absolutely right.
Right from the time we had the Northern Corridor and Eastern Corridor and all the corridors, right? Now, let's dial back to Klang Valley. Now, it's expected that we're going to see maybe about 4.2 million square feet of new warehouse supply in the second half of 2025. Will this shift, availability and pricing dynamic move?
No, it won't. You must know that the new warehouses that are built is built to new specs.
Right.
Higher eaves height, heavier floor loading, and this is not very prevalent as it is in Malaysia right now.
What brought about that new specs?
Sorry?
What brought about that new specs?
I mean, because of technology change, because of all this need for newer warehouses, and these warehouses has to be sustainable, ESG compliant. And so this new supply that is coming in is actually filling the demand for such new warehouses. So it is not oversupply situation. Of course, the older warehouses that will be left behind takes on the other kind of manufacturing growth that need not be so ESG compliant.
Saki, I like what you've mentioned there, because we always talk about new buildings and new ways of making things more sustainable. But to what you alluded earlier, we have buildings that are either warehouses or, large-scale complexes that were never really fully utilized. I mean, what happens to those?
They have to be readapted, repurposed, and studies have been done. What can we do with it? I mean, even take into account office buildings, the older office buildings, the older stock that we have in the Klang Valley. I mean, seriously, this area, whether it's a location, because it could be in the old CBD, they have to be repurposed. And inner city living is something that can be looked at. If you see some programs from overseas, you find a lot of the old warehouses in the former industrial areas being turned into lofts.
Correct, gentrified.
Gentrification. So we need to look into repurposing some of this older stock, whether it's warehouse, whether it's office. That is something that clearly has to be done, and I believe that area has to be addressed. If the government could give incentive in some way or rather for these buildings not to just lie decaying, but to be re-looked at.
You've brought up some very important points here. I mean, Malaysia is not short of really good architecture, and we've seen in Southeast Asia and in ASEAN countries where many old buildings, and it could be go-downs, it could be offices that are actually gentrified into, it could be hotels. We've seen that in Majestic. Or it could be, lofts or high-end property markets, or in fact, it could be turned into something else, right? We've seen Singapore do that into cafes and things like that. Now, you mentioned office. I want to pull it back to, we were talking about the office space earlier. We noticed that there's a trend and stabilizing, improving occupancies of office. I remember during 2020 and beyond, offices were basically haunted buildings with nobody there simply because everybody was working from home.
Where the occupancy dropped a lot.
The occupancy definitely dropped. And I think now we're seeing people coming back to the office. Definitely there's a hive of activity, especially in places like Klang Valley and Johor and Penang. Our Negeri-Negeri Selat are all like moving, right? However, what's driving this recovery? Is it really back to the office? Is it growth? What are your thoughts?
It's workplace change. Basically, what we are seeing is the fact that we are seeing the financial sector growing, the IT sector growing, the healthcare sector growing, and this is they require space.
Yes.
And therefore, the newer buildings where the quality is much better, which takes into account ESG and the new modern technology, people are moving. There is a flight to quality. But if you go back a few years pre-pandemic, a lot of growth in the office sector was shared services or back office. But today it's not that. people are looking at setting up regional offices
That's right.
here in Kuala Lumpur. So the major worry was, oh, our rentals are very cheap, and that's why we are getting all these shared services coming in a few years ago, pre-pandemic. But it's not now. Now it is regional offices with the kind of tax incentives. Take, for instance, TRX, the marquee incentives that are given, and they're really looking into that. Don't also forget the new kind of work, open space,
working,
a lot of collaboration area, and the what do you call the co-working operators are moving into that area, creating such a space so that people can go in and rent and don't worry about fit out now, financing the fit out, this sort of things, and so
the convenience, right, of just sort of plug and play.
Plug and play, correct, absolutely right, plug and play. And as you know, our services sector has grown, and therefore services means people providing services. So therefore, they need space, and a lot of these newer buildings are seeing moved by multinationals and also by services sector, is because they want to move to a new area, a better area. Shopping is nearby, convenience is nearby, amenities is nearby, so that they can attract talent.
Definitely.
Talent attraction, talent retention is a very big play when it comes to the growth of the office space.
Saki, speaking of shopping, we've got a few more minutes to go, and there's so many different sectors that I want to ask you questions on. So I'm going to shoot you a question on retail, right? When we're talking about retail space, and it seems steady, and we know that there are new developments, but Malaysia is also famous for malls galore, which is not necessarily always being used. Is this a sign that physical retail is bouncing back? And what are some of the consumer sentiments that you see moving ahead?
Okay, you cannot stop a human being from touching and looking before they buy.
Correct.
So when e-commerce came in, of course, during the pandemic time, it grew tremendously because people couldn't go out and couldn't see, and everyone thought it's going to be always trending towards that. But it's not. Digital and physical is merging together, and this is what we are seeing. And physical is not about just space and presence. It's more about showing the consumer this is the product, and having another platform, whether they buy it physically there or order it digitally from home. And this is very important. But a lot of retail is more about now place making. Retail is about experience. Retail is about what do you call convenience. And I believe it is very important to also realize, because of that, there's quite a bit of new stores coming into Malaysia to expand their business, but at the same time, the growth in F&B, social interaction, F&B, having a coffee, having dinner, having lunch together, that area, F&B is growing more than in terms of product sales.
And actually, we do see that there are a lot of retail spaces and shopping malls that are actually filled with, like you said, placemaking. I love that word because it talks about not just transactional relationship between human beings, but how are you going to create this experience in totality.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing that more and more now. If you're talking about malls, it's not just about shops and maybe sundries and supermarkets, but there's a lot more experiential activities that are happening in these malls. Now, when we're talking about hospitality, right, because you did say retail, and I think retail, office, hospitality are all very tied to each other, especially for those that are coming into the country, right? Tourism, as we know, are clearly on the rebound. We're right smack in durian season, which means we've got hordes of people just coming into the country also to experience the king of fruits. But especially now, we're talking about Sabah and Sarawak. How has this translated into hospitality performance? I mean, are we seeing it back to pre-pandemic levels? And I wanted to ask you specifically, because you did mention about ESG earlier. How is this bouncing back, perhaps with the tie of ecotourism and things like that?
Well, when it comes to tourist arrivals, as you know, it's in 2024, it's up 25% from 2023. And tourist receipts went up 43%, 102 billion in 2024. The tourist expenditure per capita also went up. Occupancies are now at pre-pandemic level. The most significant thing, our average daily room rate has also increased. I remember pre-pandemic, we were always complaining we got 5-star hotels selling at 3-star when compared to other countries. But what we are seeing is a rise in ADR as well.
Okay.
Why all this has happened? High air travel now. People, after being cooped up for so many years, 2 years or so.
We've been released.
We've released out. So you go out, you want to travel, you want to see the world. And there's high air travel, visa exemptions by the G2G has really helped. China, now India. New airline routes.
Yes.
MAHB is exploring new airline routes. And our airports are being expanded, upgraded. And don't forget, of course, Visit Malaysia here in 2026, and also the fact that we are now the ASEAN chair.
Yes.
And we are increasingly becoming a much more of a MICE center for this region at least. And that's where we need to target at. Sabah also, as you were mentioning just now, Sabah is also getting a lot of new flights coming in.
Yes.
And the Taiwanese and the Chinese are back, you know, investing in Sabah and also being tourists in Sabah. You know, a funny thing, this is, tell you, I went to my office, KK office the other day, and there's this young man called Mitch,
right,
who works in my office there, and he has a sample of sand, beach sand quality from
all the different
parts of Sabah,
wow,
and also from other parts of the world. And when you just look at the beach sand quality, Sabah's beaches are so beautiful as far as just the sand is concerned. So that's quite interesting.
Sarki, last question. When we're talking about sand and soil, there's really no place like home.
Yes.
So I want to ask you a question on residential. What do you think are some of the signs moving forward? We know that residential space, we saw a 3.2% increase in Kuala Lumpur, but of course the notable 8.7% drop in transactions. Now, is this a red flag? Now I'm going to kind of wrap this up with a final question of, we're talking about what Malaysians need in terms of residential and shelter and security, but also what are some of your thoughts and your aspirations moving ahead in this space?
Residential sector.
Yes.
Well, there's no red flag, no alarm, just because what you call transaction volume has reduced. There are lesser launches, maybe. That is, in fact, that is what we found. That's why the quantum of sales are lesser, but value has gone up. Yeah. So that is the reason. So it's not an overhang. If overhang exists in KL for those condos, contributed mostly by service apartments above 1 million. So that is where there's overhang. And expats are increasing because multinationals are coming in. Tenant demand is increasing. So investment is returning back to buying the unit to rent out, getting a good rental from what do you call expatriates who are located here. So I would say the resident sector is stable. It is not an overhang situation. Our economy is good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarki, for joining us today. We've covered everything from rental to hospitality, from retail to ecotourism, from ESG to warehouses. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was really
I just
insightful.
add on a few things. You said what sector will outperform? That's one of the questions.
Okay, yes. In 1 minute.
1 minute.
Okay.
Hospitality,
right?
And growth areas.
Okay.
This will outperform.
Hospitality and growth areas.
Investing in growth areas.
Wonderful. So please take note of that. If you are a property investor, there are some sage advice there. Now, this brings us to the end of today's discussion on The Nation. Thank you so much for joining us. The real estate sector may be built on bricks and mortars, as we've heard. It's also shaped by innovation, regulation, and people. And of course, whether it's investing in industrial hubs, reinvesting in retail, or reinventing and rethinking what residential areas can look like, there's definitely a lot to unpack. So thank you for joining us today, Sarki, and this is NADIAH ABDUL. Thanks for watching, and be sure to follow us on the conversations on issues that matter. Malaysia, stay safe and be kind.